but I'd like to introduce you all to Lily Niknami and Kimberly Jones. They are our presenters today for the Watershed Boundary Dataset and Hydrologic Unit Codes. I'll turn the floor over to you now. Take it away.
Thank you, Keith. You got the pronunciation perfect, by the way.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone for joining today. We appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all. Today, we're going to be talking about the Watershed Boundary Dataset and Hydrologic Unit Codes. So let me know if you can see my slide advance. Can everyone see that?
Everything looks great. Thank you.
Okay, great. So the Watershed Boundary Dataset is a seamless baseline hydrologic unit dataset for the nation. And the units in the WBD are delineated in a nested, multi-level, hierarchical drainage system. That's oftentimes what we refer to it as is hierarchical. Now, the boundaries in the WBD are defined by hydrographic and topographic criteria with no regard to administrative boundaries. Hydrologic units are considered compliant, WBD compliant, when they adhere to the WBD standards and specifications and conform to the WBD schema. Now, I want to bring everyone's attention to this graphic here on the right. Now, the boundaries that you're seeing in red are our hydrologic unit boundaries. They're based off of this topographic map here. Now, this lines that you're seeing in blue are going to be your streams from the NHD or the National Hydrography Dataset. As you can see, I've denoted on this graphic here an outlet. Now, for our purposes, an outlet is the point where the flow line is exiting the hydrologic unit. So the outlet of this stream here that the hydrologic unit is based off of. So I just wanted to point that out here. In this graphic, we have one hydrologic unit, two hydrologic units, three hydrologic units. I've just pointed out two outlets here. So historically, the WBD was developed by direct interpretation of topographic information included on paper, polyester film, or digital topographic maps. The WBD is being updated based on observations from data users, improved base data, mapping methods, and the addition of optional 14 and 16-digit hydrologic units. So since the initial delineation of the WBD, we've worked with a variety of agencies and partners to really improve the boundaries with higher resolution base data. The WBD is a 1 to 24K scale or greater for CONUS, 1 to 25K scale for Hawaii and the US territories, and 1 to 63,360 or greater for Alaska. Now, the WBD is a multi-resolution data set because, again, it was built from a variety of different sources, including DRGs, DEMs, orthoimagery, NHD, state hydrography data sets, topographic maps, bathymetric maps, you name it. The WBD was built in collaboration with various resource agencies, including EPA, NRCS, BLM, Forest Service, and WBD partners. We have quite a few partners across the nation that we collaborate with on state-based projects to update the WBD with higher resolution base data. And those are really taken on a state-by-state basis according to what the state really needs for their WBD delineation. So we work very closely with our state partners in the WBD. So when is a watershed considered a WBD hydrologic unit? Now, as many of us know, the term watershed has a variety of uses and meanings in the scientific community. And as such, the WBD units are referred to by their level rather than by our historic terminology that we used to use. So over time, we've changed how we refer to the different subdivisions of the WBD hydrologic unit levels. Our historic terminology was the region, the subregion, the basin, the subbasin, the watershed, and the subwatershed. Now, in this table, those correlate to our current terminology. So the region we're now referring to as the 2-digit hydrologic unit. The subregion is the 4-digit hydrologic unit. The basin is the 6-digit hydrologic unit. Subbasin is 8-digit, watershed is 10-digit, and subwatershed is 12-digit. So we just wanted to clarify a little bit of that terminology, since some of you may have been using the WBD for a while, so you may be familiar with some of that historical terminology that we used to use. Now, in our WBD standard, the newest version that we released, all of the terminology reflects the current terminology. So that really is what we're using moving forward for all of the hydrologic unit levels. The hydrologic units in the WBD represent the drainage area of a hydrologic feature to its outlet. So if we think back to that first graphic on the first slide, we pointed out those outlets for the various hydrologic units. Now, using the Penobscot River here as an example in this graphic, the Penobscot River is a large main stem river. This is in Maine, and the Penobscot River flows through multiple hydrologic units. Here on this graphic, the purple units that you're seeing are the 12-digit hydrologic unit boundaries. Now, some scientists, some folks that are doing analyses in this area might consider the entire Penobscot River a watershed in and of itself, and that's completely fine. But for WBD specific purposes, we subdivide our units along this main stem to meet our size criteria and our WBD standards. So we've talked about hydrologic units. Now, what is a HUC, or a hydrologic unit code? We have a lot of acronyms that we use in the data set, so bear with me. Hydrologic unit, HU. Hydrologic unit code is HUC. So the hydrologic unit codes, to describe where a unit is in the country and the level that the unit is, we assign a progressive 2-digit hydrologic unit code, or HUC code, to all of the polygons in the WBD. Now, the number and value of the digits specifies how far nested a particular hydrologic unit is in its parent and which parent hydrologic unit it belongs to. The larger the number of digits, the smaller the hydrologic unit is in size. So using this graphic as an example, I want everyone to take a look at region 18, our 2-digit hydrologic unit 18. Now, region 18 is a little bit of a unique scenario, right? Because it's our California region. Coincidentally, it looks like the boundary of California, but you can see that across the nation, the rest of the delineations do not look like state boundaries themselves. This is just kind of a unique scenario based on the topography here. But using region 18 as an example, now we're going to subdivide to the next level in the hierarchy. So that's our 4-digit hydrologic unit. Then we subdivide again to our 6-digit, and then to our 8 and our 10 and our 12. So we're breaking out all of these levels in the hydrologic unit hierarchy. And as you can see, as our code gets larger, our hydrologic unit gets smaller in size. Now, the WBD data set is complete for the US to the 12-digit hydrologic unit level. In our data set, we do support 2 additional levels of subdivision, and we call these the 14 and 16 hydrologic units. Now, those are optional for delineation. You're not going to see them everywhere. And since we have these 2 additional levels, the codes can be 14 or 16 digits in length where those levels have been delineated. So we're going to use our Upper Colorado region as an example of this subdivision all the way to the 12-digit hydrologic unit level. So we're starting here at our 2-digit region 14. Now, the size of this hydrologic unit, the average size is 177,560 acres. We have exactly 21 2-digit hydrologic units in the national WBD data set. Now, if we continue to subdivide to our 4-digit hydrologic unit, we are going to highlight 1408, which is the San Juan. The average size of our 4 digits in the WBD data set is 16,800 acres. And we have approximately 222 4-digit hydrologic units in the data set. Now we can see, again, this large main stem river that we're subdividing.
Lily, I'm going to just jump in really quick. The average size you did square miles, not acres, just an FYI.
Oh, thank you. I'm reading acres here, square miles.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we continue down to the 6-digit hydrologic unit level, we're looking at 140802, which is the lower San Juan. Average size 10,596 square miles for this level. And we have approximately 376 digit hydrologic units in the data set. If we continue on to the 8-digit hydrologic unit level, you can see that we're starting to break out some of the major tributaries along our main stem here. And we're taking a look at 1408, 0203, which the name is Montezuma. Now for our 8-digit hydrologic unit level, the average size is 700 square miles, and the approximate number of hydrologic units that we have at that level is 2,270. Continuing on to our 10-digit hydrologic unit level, we're looking at 1408, 0203, 01. The average size here is 227 square miles, or about ranging from 40,000 to 250,000 acres. And we have an approximate number of 20,000 10-digit hydrologic units in the WBD. At our 12-digit hydrologic unit level, here we are zooming into 1408, 0203, 0101. The average size at this level is going to be 40 square miles, and we have approximately 100,000 12-digit hydrologic units at this level. Now, again, the 14 and 16-digit hydrologic unit level, since those are optional for delineation, the size range for those is variable. We allow a variety of different size ranges for our delineation options that we have for those hydrologic unit levels, since they are really developed on a state-by-state basis for project-specific needs. So what are some of the common uses of the WBD? WBD data oftentimes are used as reporting and analysis units for projects related to water quality analysis, habitat monitoring, contaminant tracing, subsurface stormwater mapping, municipal stormwater management and reporting, you name it. Everyone uses the WBD for a different purpose. Now, one thing that I wanted to highlight for those of you that are familiar with the NHD, which is the surface water component to the WBD data set, spatial integration and addressing of the WBD with the NHD is very important, not only for cartographic purposes, but to make sure that we are really representing the outlets correctly. We are integrating the boundaries to the surface hydrography and iteratively updating the two data sets as things change on the landscape. So we oftentimes refer to and think of the NHD reach and measures like street addresses and the WBD hydrologic unit codes like zip codes. So these two data sets are continually talking to each other and working in tandem. So when we update the WBD with higher resolution base data, again, this is completed on a state-by-state basis. And an example for when we would do a project like that would be when we're updating the WBD boundaries to represent changes in flow direction or diversions in major canal systems. You know, depending on how flow direction is changing, we do our best to work with our partners to make sure that we're reflecting that accurately in the WBD data set. So if a flow direction changes in the NHD, we want to make sure that we reflect that update in the WBD and that the boundary is at the right location. So we're iteratively working on those updates with our partners. Now, some examples that I have here are boundary updates with LiDAR data. So if we take a look at this first graphic on the left, the old boundary, which is the 24K delineation, original WBD delineation here, is in orange. Now the new boundary is in red. And as we can see, it's following the LiDAR DEM a lot better. When we do updates with LiDAR and with higher resolution base data, one of the things that we see very commonly is that our stream network has changed. So we need to update the boundary to reflect that, right? So in this case here to the right, our old boundary is in orange, our new boundary is in black, and it's based on LiDAR. You can see that the new boundary is much more refined. And the old boundary actually was cutting off this headwater stream. So we updated the boundary to reflect the LiDAR and the new hydrography. Those are pretty common updates that we see when we do our data improvements with high resolution based data. You know, we can see a combination of major changes where the boundary is moving quite a bit from the original, and then we see changes where it could just be more of an adjustment along a ridge line here. So where are we going next in the hydrography world at USGS? We are moving into 3D HP or 3D hydrography program. Now, the goal of 3D HP is to have a stack of interoperable hydrography data that's aligned by virtue of being derived from a common elevation source. So taking a look at this table here, as we move into the future, our elevation source is going to be standardized at 1 meter in CONUS, 5 meter in Alaska. Our hydrography source is going to be, again, derived from this elevation, and we're going to have a lot more flow lines than we currently have in the NHD. So in the future, everything is going to be derived and standardized on these new elevation sources. And the WBD is going to be derived from that elevation as well. So that's the current program direction as we move into the future. Okay, so if you want to learn more about the hydrography program, about the watershed boundary data set, I did provide some links in the PowerPoint here, and I can distribute this PowerPoint after the meeting if anyone would like that. And you can also download our WBD products from our National Hydrography Products endpoint. We refresh those products on a monthly basis, and those are all publicly available for you guys to download and utilize for your projects. We do recommend that you download all of your WBD and NHD data from our USGS endpoint. We do serve our data on the NRCS Geospatial Data Gateway as well, but that endpoint isn't updated as frequently as our products are on the USGS endpoint. All right, does anyone have any questions for us?
And now's the time for questions, folks. Feel free to either unmute yourself and ask that question or put your question into the chat line. I've been monitoring the chat line, Lily, and a little side conversation has been going on with some questions kind of floating around. And so I'm going to summarize some of those things I'm seeing. And that is for, right now, Idaho is resolved, if we want to call it that, to a 12-digit hydrologic unit code. And the question was, are there any plans to create 14 and 16 digit for the state of Idaho? But is that then tied to Idaho having coverage of LIDAR, 1 meter LIDAR? Or can it be done with 10 meter national elevation data type of resolution?
Yeah, so that's a great question. You can use the 3-depth 10 meter if you want. Generally, we recommend that if you have a higher resolution elevation source that you use that, just because it will give you better boundaries. We do have, when we went through and we did our NHD plus HR generation process, a part of that product is catchments. Those catchments are based on the 10 meter 3-depth data. And so for folks that are interested in, maybe delineating 14s and 16s, if you want to use that source, you can start from the catchments and then aggregate up to save yourself from some time. We find most often our partners that are delineating 14s and 16s with higher resolution based data use a semi-automated approach, something like Arc Hydro, to delineate those units. As far as whether Idaho is planning to create hydrologic units at that level, I'm not really sure. Since we are moving to the 3D HP world, we're actually going to be stopping the edits to the WBD data set June 30th of 2023. So we still have a bit of time, but we are going to be focusing on the 3D HP product, moving into the future. So, there's still time if you wanted to do that, but we'll just have to coordinate closely to make sure that we can meet that deadline.
Now, just a follow up to that real quick, and I have another question that came in from Jack Horton that we'll ask. But the follow up to this one is, by listening to your answer, it sounds like the USGS, your office, does not actually create those higher resolution watershed boundaries, but rather someone else. The partners that you alluded to, would that be some partner like Idaho Department of Water Resources?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, cool. Okay, and now I'll go to Jack Horton's question. What is the recommended practice for reporting by hydrologic unit code when the hydrologic unit code boundaries change? Is there a version number that can be used to define the hydrologic unit code boundary that is being referenced?
That is a great question. So in the past, what our recommendation has been is if you need to report an update to a boundary, you can put it into the markup application. Now, edits for that application have already shut down. So if you have a boundary that you think needs to be changed, we recommend that you contact us directly. And what we'll do is we will look at the data that you provide to us and load it into an ArcMap session, take a look at it, and see if we agree with that update. And then we would coordinate with the steward, the WBD steward for that state as well, just to make sure that they're in agreement with that change before we physically make the update to the WBD data set.
Okay.
I have follow-up to that question also. So unfortunately, there's not a version number on the WBD. So the way that we recommend people reference it is by the download date that you download the data. And we do that because the data is refreshed on a month, at least the national data set is refreshed on a monthly cycle. And so you may not actually even have edits that updated for your state or your area, but that data is going to get refreshed. So it makes it a little bit hard to do a version. So we just say when you downloaded that data, what month did you download that data? What year did you download that data? Going into the future with 3DHP, I believe that the intent is that we will have versioning on that so that it's a little bit easier to report when things change. But for the WBD, yeah, reporting purposes, it's really download date.
And that guidance would be applicable also to if a person was using the web service, they could indicate that they were using that web service on a certain date, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Jack had a follow-up question to that. If locations are referenced by percent along a reach, is there a good way to crosswalk to newer reach data, or would the same type of thing be applied where a person would simply have to reference when they used that data or looked along a reach?
Is that in particular, are you just a follow-up, are you talking about referencing to the WBD or referencing to the NHD?
Well, this is Jack. I'm asking in more general terms. I'm not sure which one would
Okay.
apply.
Okay.
The reach should be the National Hydrography data set, isn't that right?
That
Yeah,
is correct.
that's correct.
Yes. Yes. So if you wanted to, so we have the USGS has developed with partners tools to what we call address or assign an address to a feature based on that reach code. So the NHD reach code, what percentage of, like, is it 50% upstream on this reach? And then within those tools, they've developed a way to, if the NHD is updated, they've developed a way to migrate those from one version of the NHD to another version of the NHD. And there's information on our USGS.gov NHD website about that process. So there are ways, if you're just trying to address your data, there are ways to migrate that from one version to another version. If you're trying to represent it via like just a report, I think it's probably basically the same. You have to report what version of the data you did your reference, like this is 50% upstream on this reach from this version of the data, right? I don't think that there's an easy way to do that just for reporting purposes, other than actually doing the addressing on the data itself and then doing that crosswalk to the newer data.